Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We'll allow a minute or two for folks to arrive and for us to let everybody in, and then we will start off with practice in just a moment. But great to see everybody here. So far, there's almost 776 of us. There's about 4,700 people signed up for this, but quite a few will probably watch the recording. We'll see how many of us are here live today, but it's pretty exciting to be here with almost 800 people now here to meditate together on this Sunday, April 6th. Very powerful, powerful situation that I'm very grateful to all of you for coming and being here, and we'll continue to let people in. It takes a while to let everybody in. Maybe we could just sort of sit silently. I'm going to make a few remarks just at the beginning, just kind of give some context, but I want to wait till everybody's here so they get to hear it. So maybe we could all just sort of sit in silence for a moment as we everybody is able to join the room. Give it just another couple of minutes, letting people arrive. Okay, so we're steadily climbing with our attendance. It's at 865 right now. Um, So people are kind of being let in automatically as they arrive now, since there wasn't a big backlog. So I think we'll go ahead and uh, you can see a bed in the background there. In a hotel room in Cusco, Peru. I'll say a little more about that after we have our initial practice. But let's go ahead and start with some practice. And so I'm going to ask our team to ring the gong, and then we'll just start practicing. So go ahead and establish a posture that you feels relatively upright, uplifted, awake, at the same time relaxed and stable. To begin with, having established a posture that feels relatively upright, uplifted, awake, relaxed, stable, I'd like to invite us all to simply drop into being, just being, letting go of any agenda, any need to accomplish anything, just relaxing in the being. Nowhere to go, nothing to do or accomplish. Nothing to measure or evaluate or compare, just being. There's a quality of beingness, presence, we can tap into, relax into, that's been there our entire lives, always right there in the background. Basic being, presence, consciousness, simply relaxing into being. Because we are very visually and auditorily oriented, and because we have very active cognitive faculties, lots of thoughts, our attention is often centered up in the head area. So the invitation now is to let our attention drop down from the head through the neck, shoulders, upper body, upper back, upper chest, down through the torso, through our waist and buttocks, hips, pelvic region, and down through our upper legs, knees, lower legs, and all the way down to the soles of our feet. Feeling what we call body, this landscape of actual tactile physical sensations that we call body. The invitation is to simply feel whatever's there from head to toe, inside and out. While continuing to relax into being. Just being. Feeling and being. Being and feeling. Inviting attitudinal qualities of openness, non-judgment, and a deep curiosity to know ourselves, to know our own being as deeply as we can, to feel into our own body and experience our own body, this landscape of sensation we call body, as deeply as we can. Simply opening to feeling all the sensations on the surface of the skin, throughout the body, from head to toe, back, sides, and front. And then also very importantly, opening the door so that the inner landscape emerges into our awareness. the inner landscape of sensate experience, dynamic flow of energy within the body, all the sensations related with the breath as it flows in and out. Feeling into the body with more and more depth, remembering that the entire body is a living organism, all the way down to the bones and including the bones, all containing neuronal cells connected to the central nervous system, and thus all sensory, all feeling. Feeling the overall weight and mass of the muscles and bones, the force of gravity holding us down on the earth. Again, feeling all of the sensations that arise and fall away with each in-breath and out-breath. The contraction and relaxation of the diaphragm muscle, the abdominal muscles, the intercostal muscles between the ribs. The heartbeat, blood circulation. Being willing to feel any sensations of discomfort that may be present, just being curious about that. Feeling and being and feeling. Feeling and being and feeling. Relaxing into pure presence, anchored in a deeply felt experience of physical sensation. Feeling and being and feeling. So thank you all very much. And again, thank you for being here. So I'm going to let you know how we're going to make use of this time together today. We're going to be doing various practices. We're going to explore these 5 networks of healing and awakening, these 5 neural networks. And we're going to explore practices for targeting these networks and the idea of creating a practice stack, our own stack of body-mind practices that we can all experiment with to cultivate deeper states of presence, being, flow that support healing and awakening and our overall personal spiritual evolution as human beings. So we're approaching, there's 992 of us here on Zoom. We're approaching 1,000. That's pretty wonderful to imagine that all of these wonderful human beings, all of us, all around the world, practicing together, coming together with this intention to practice together. So I invite us all for a moment to just close our eyes, drop back into beingness, and cultivate the intention, like, why are we here today? Why are we here? What is the intention of our practice? And whatever your intention is fine. It can be for healing, to heal traumas, can be for physical healing. It can be to continue our personal and spiritual evolution as human beings, can be for awakening and liberating ourselves, even the idea of full enlightenment, which I certainly believe in, can be to further stabilize our practice and ground our practice in the body and develop a practice that really benefits our lives on a daily basis. So we may have all kinds of motivations, and these are all wonderful. So I just invite us all to acknowledge those to ourselves. So we're bringing some intentionality to our time together into our practice. And then I would also invite us all, voluntarily, of course, if it feels right for you, to have the sense that we're also practicing for the benefit of all beings. And really just imagine for a minute the vastness of that. 8 billion fellow human beings on this planet Earth. And how many other billions of our fellow species? And then perhaps how many other billions and trillions and countless beings in all dimensions, seen and unseen, in all the worlds of all the cosmos. So expanding our mind, expanding our hearts to include all these beings and practicing to relieve their suffering and support their awakening. May all beings, seen and unseen, be free of suffering. May all beings, seen and unseen, be happy. May all beings, seen and unseen, have the opportunity to continue their own spiritual journey to awakening. So thank you very much. Personally, I feel it's very important to not only practice for ourselves, but to practice for all beings. But that's also efficacious, because to really hold that sense of all beings, our awareness has to really expand, our consciousness has to expand. So that's a it's a skillful means, as well as being a wonderful intention. I think a very important one. And actually, I do believe we impact the world in this way. We're all deeply interconnected. And so this is not just a nice idea. When we bring to mind all beings, we practice for all beings, I very much feel we are affecting all beings. And we are all beings. We're all completely interconnected anyway. So personally, I feel it's a very meaningful thing to do. And it also supports our practice to expand our mind, expand our consciousness further. So thank you for that. So I'm just going to say just a minute or two about where I am. You'll see in the background, we have gone over 1,000 now. So there's 1,000 of us here on Zoom, and then that's the limit on Zoom, but we have it set up so that others uh, can see a live stream through YouTube on a web page. So we don't know how many will be joining us until later, but we'll let you all know how many joined us today. But others, there's 1,000 of us here on Zoom right now, which is pretty amazing, from all over the world. And then others are joining us by the live stream and able to see and so forth. And we will take some questions. Obviously, with these numbers, we won't be able to take questions from everybody, but we'll take your questions in chat later. So just so I can get a sense of that and see what's cooking later on. We'll do that later on. But just I'm here in Cusco, Peru. I'll just say briefly a minute or two about that. I have a long history with Cusco. I first arrived here in 1973, I think, as a backpacker, young adventurer backpacker in 1973 in my early 20s. And spent a lot of time living here and exploring the indigenous culture and the archaeology and all of that, and lived in a number of valleys off the Sacred Valley. The Incas, if people are familiar with the Sacred Valley, which goes all the way down into the Machu Picchu ruins, which are very famous, which is kind of at a tropical level. Here in Cusco, we're at 12,000 feet, and it's kind of desert mountains. And then you can go about an hour over the hill, and you're down into the Sacred Valley, and the valley floor is at around starts around 11 and gradually goes down 10,000. Now, by the time you get down to Machu Picchu, it's like 5 or 6,000 as tropical mountains. And so I lived in that valley for quite a few years, and there's all these little finger valleys that come into the main valley coming down from the glaciers. And I lived in 3 or 4 of those at different times. And I met my first wife there, who went by Lola. And um, we eventually married and came to the States. My son Robert was born in the States, and that was over 50 years ago. Not my son's birth, but when I first arrived here. And um, my son, let's see, would be almost 49 now. So it was almost 50 years ago. And tragically, we lost my son in 2020, in September of 2020 during the lockdowns. He had been back and forth his whole life between Peru and the States and was a chef and restaurant manager. And he had moved back to the valley in Peru because he was suffering seizures because he had been he had suffered an attack actually in Cusco in 2008 and a frontal lobe head injury and took a while to recover from that and that was fine. But later on, about I don't know 6 years later, started having seizures and so he tried to regulate those. He moved back here because he thought he would have less seizures because they're very stress related. And anyway, the lockdowns happened, so he was stuck here in Peru. And anyway, his mom found him one morning. There's a property out in the Sacred Valley where he had built a house for his mom, and then later built a house for himself, small houses. And so his mom went over. I hadn't heard from him, and found him. She called me on the phone right away, and pretty quickly we figured out he was gone. So he probably woke up with a seizure in the middle of the night and had a heart attack, and yeah, so we lost him. And then now, tragically, his mom, Lola, has developed a serious cancer in the last couple of years. And so I came down to be with her. And unfortunately, I talked to her on the phone shortly before a couple of days before I came. But by the time I got down here, had been gone to the hospital and had a heart attack while in the hospital. And when I got here, she was on a ventilator. And so I've been here 8 days now, and I was visiting her in the hospital every day and giving her guidance. And she was familiar with Buddhist traditions. She was somewhere in between her Catholic upbringings and a lot of exposure to Buddhism. And so I was giving her guidance on dying every day. And then when we got word that she passed on Friday. Um, uh, and I was able to get there within about a half hour, and they left the body undisturbed, and I was able to continue to give her guidance for hours. And and thankfully, I've been praying since there was no possibility of recovery. But in Peru, they can't turn off the ventilator. They had it as low as they could legally have it, and they reduced medications that were supporting her heart and so forth. But they had her on pain medication and tranquilize, to keep her comfortable, and she was comfortable, not in pain. But there was no way to, just kind of let go. So it was up to her when to let go. And I was counseling her and to let go of this body, that her time had arrived. And gratefully, I was very grateful that she was able to let go of her body and transition on April 4th, Friday, which happens to be the same day of my first spiritual master, Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, passed April 4th in 1987. We celebrate that day every year, calling it the Parinirvana Day, the day that he left his body. And he was considered a completely enlightened being, so it's called the Parinirvana. And anyway, it seemed very auspicious to me that Lola was able to let go of her body and transition on that same day. And she had met Trungpa Rinpoche several times. So that's what I'm doing here. It's been very intense, as you might imagine. And but anyway, that's what I'm doing here. And I'll be returning home Tuesday. I get home by Wednesday. I'll be really looking forward to getting home to my wife Sophie and so forth. So anyway, enough about me, but I want to let you know where this is coming from today. So we're going to be talking about these 5 neural networks that are involved in uh, healing and personal evolution, awakening, liberation. I also, as we begin today, I want to acknowledge my teachers. This is a completely secular offering here today, and the other meditation programs that we offer. I'll mention some of these opportunities towards the end of our time today to further your practice with us in different programs and courses we have. But they're all offered in a secular context, which doesn't mean non-spiritual. It just means it's not tied to any particular religious tradition and doesn't require any adherence to any particular religious or spiritual traditions. But it's very much grounded in my own training. I've been practicing for more than 50 years. My primary lineage has been in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Kagyu Nyingma, for people that know about such things. And my first teacher was Trungpa Rinpoche, as I mentioned, and I continue practicing with my Tibetan teachers, and that's been my core lineage for a long time. But I also got very deeply involved in the Zen tradition. I actually really started with Zen back in the 60s. That's how I kind of figured out I was a Buddhist when I contacted Zen. But then with permission from my Tibetan teachers, I wanted to study with Bernie Glassman because I was very taken by his integration of Zen and social action work, peace work, and when he founded the Zen Peacemakers. So I, uh, I started practicing with Bernie, and Bernie became my Zen teacher, my Zen master. And so I practiced very deeply in these traditions for over 50 years, and eventually became an empowered teacher in Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And also before Bernie passed, he empowered me as a Roshi or Zen master in the Soto Zen lineage. At the same time, I've been studying every meditation tradition you can imagine for the last 50 years. I'm really a student of the art of meditation. So I've studied deeply in Sufism and Christian mysticism and Christian meditation, Jewish meditation, all the secular non-dual Advaita teachings, the Hindu Advaita teachings. I really studied directly with many, many different teachers, and also been to many retreats and but studied and read voraciously. And so, as well as I've been a student of, I have a PhD in psychology. I've been a student of psychology East and West for that same period of 50 years, and I've been studying neuroscience as deeply as I can for the last 20 years or so, especially the neuroscientific study of meditation and yoga and things like that. So, neurosomatic mindfulness, and what we're offering today, is an integration of all those things, the most advanced non-dual practices in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, Shikantaza from Zen, and many, many other traditions and methodologies within the various worldwide disciplines of meditation and inner yogic work, and integrated with current neuroscience and elements of positive psychology as well. So just that's the background. So from current neuroscience, we know there are five neural networks that are very deeply and directly involved in meditation and very particularly involved in healing trauma and in supporting our personal spiritual evolution and really ultimately supporting awakening. So I'm gonna say a little bit about each of these. And neurosomatic mindfulness, which is a deeply embodied approach to meditation and um, a neuroscientifically informed and trauma informed approach to meditation, really addresses all of these neural networks to a degree, very directly. There's a fifth one, which it's a kind of a connecting. Well, I'll mention that. But there are many other practices that we can do to directly affect these networks as well. And every morning I do an hour where I have a practice stack where I do all these different practices. And I experiment with doing this one first or that one, and a little more of this, a little more of that. And I've developed the idea of I don't know if people ever were audiophiles, the idea of stacking components. And today in the world of biohacking, you have your supplement stack, or if you're running an online business, you have your tech stack to be able to deliver your services and so forth. So this idea of stacking, right? Or habit stacking is a very important idea. How we link habits together and they become to an anchor habit, and we can link habits and that becomes a routine and so forth. So this idea of stacking, all very related. So I have a whole hour that I've been practicing with every morning for many, many, many years. Um, and then I also have my traditional Tibetan Vajrayana practice that I do with my wife Sophie every morning for anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. So That's where I keep experimenting with all this personally, as well as doing retreats and the like. So, the five neural networks. The first one is the attention network. That's fairly obvious. In any kind of meditation or mindfulness training, we're training our attention, our ability to focus our attention. There's a technical term from the literature called attention switching. And that means we can constantly switch our attention from one thing to another. Like right now, my attention is on all of you and those of you I can see on Zoom. In fact, I haven't done this yet, but let's see, where's the window? I'm just going to quickly kind of scroll through here a little bit so I can see all your wonderful faces as I talk about this. So I have my attention on this screen. Now I could decide to switch my attention over here to the right where I have a bottle of water and put my attention there for a moment. Then I could say, no, I need to bring my attention back to this Zoom screen, right? So we have this capacity to switch our attention. Now, very often when we all arrive in adulthood with most of us with minds that are not very trained, unless we're very lucky to be introduced to things very early on. So I'm kind of into the screens where people don't have their uh, photos on. So, but I love to see all of you who I could see. And at certain points in the day, I may ask people to turn their cameras on and just kind of scroll through the screens together, take a moment to do that. So we just get a sense of being together here and this community that we're creating. So anyway, we have this ability to switch our attention. Now, normally our attention is wandering all over the place. It's being distracted from various things, and it just tends to wander, right? Our minds wander, our attention wanders. So we can stabilize our attention. And any practice that we're doing to stabilize our attention, there's an attention network in the brain which connects different. You can look all this stuff up neuroscientifically yourself if you're curious about that. So these are networks that connect different parts of the brain. And so the attention network, as you do practices that train your attention, that network becomes more robust. It actually increases in neuronal thickness, and it means that there's more connections, more dendrites, in some cases with neurogenesis, actually more neurons. And so this network becomes more robust, and thus we have more stable attention. So we have a greater capacity for focus, for concentration, for stable attention, right? It's pretty simple, pretty obvious. And that actually means we're changing the brain. We're literally developing a more robust attention network in the brain, right? And over time, that it's, we can focus right now and focus our attention, right? We can through some effort and intention, right? And at least for a moment, we can enter the state of attention, right? But for that state of attention to become a trait, a stable trait, requires that that neural network becomes more robust. And how do we train that? We train that by training our attention. So as I'm sure all of you know, any basic mindfulness practice, we choose an object of mindfulness. Very commonly, it's the felt experience of the body and breath. And we have the intention to place our attention there. And when the mind wanders, we gently bring it back. We don't beat ourselves up about that. We know that's just what the mind does. So we bring it back. And every time we notice our mind has wandered, we bring it back. It's like exercising the muscle of attention, right? And just in the same way, when we exercise, that our muscles grow, physically grow, become more robust. In the same way, that attention network is becoming physically more robust. We're literally reshaping the architecture in our brain, right? So that's the attention network. That one's fairly obvious, I think, but very important, very foundational. Then we have the self-regulation network. And this is the ability to regulate our own autonomic nervous system. I imagine most of you have heard of the autonomic nervous system. It operates almost all the processes in our body. This incredibly most complex organism in the known universe, by the way. The human body is the most complex organism in the known universe, and the human nervous system and brain is the most complex organism or even complex machine in the known universe. The brain has roughly 1.1 trillion brain cells, right? Roughly 80 to 100 billion of those are neurons, the smart cells, right? To put that in context, in the Milky Way, it's suggested that there's about 80 to 100 billion stars. So we have about the same number of neurons, the smart cells in the brain, that there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So imagine. Not only that, all those neurons connect with each other. The average neuron makes connections with another 10 neurons or more, 10 to 50 actually, and is communicating, very rapidly. And so, the synaptic connections create networks. There's like 500 trillion, or could even be more, connections in the brain. So the possibilities become almost infinite, right? So it's really a phenomenal thing, which, with artificial intelligence, we're trying to duplicate for better or worse. Probably all of us are using ChatGPT already, but also we know there's some risks about artificial intelligence. We may have some concerns, but at any rate, it's just another tool for the most part. Hopefully, we'll keep it in check. But anyway, we're trying to duplicate this incredible thing, the human brain. So anyway, there's these different networks. So the self-regulation network regulates our own autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system has two branches, as most of you probably know. It has a sympathetic branch, which upregulates. We need that for alertness, but then it goes beyond alertness into stress, and it can go all the way into fight or flight and panic and so forth, getting really out of control. And then we have the parasympathetic branch, which is the rest and relaxation, rest and digest branch, right? And the two are operating all the time, and there's an appropriate balance for any human activity, right? If we're responding to a crisis, we're going to have a lot of sympathetic arousal, and a lot of the parasympathetic can go offline. Our whole digestive processes, immune system, all kinds of things can go offline because we don't need those to respond to that crisis, right? What we need is the adrenaline and the sympathetic arousal. If we want to go to sleep at night and rest well, we need very little sympathetic arousal and a lot of parasympathetic, right? So that's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. And then for any human activity, there's an appropriate ideal balance. Now, the good news is we can regulate our own autonomic nervous system. How do we regulate it? With the breath, with the breath. Because the autonomic nervous system is connected with the breath. When we breathe in, there's a slight activation of the sympathetic, the upregulating branch of the autonomic nervous system. When we breathe out, a slight activation of the parasympathetic, downregulating branch of the autonomic nervous system. So by doing breath exercises, we can regulate our own nervous system. Now, in basic meditation, as we relax into any kind of mindfulness awareness meditation, we're generally going to have a more relaxed breath. We're going to have more parasympathetic arousal. And if we're doing diaphragmatic breathing, if we become chest breathers, which is a stress response, but if we retrain ourselves to become diaphragmatic breathers, there's a kind of a massage that the breath is doing with the vagus nerve, which increases parasympathetic activation. So basic meditation always increases parasympathetic activation generally. But then we can do specific things. Many of you have probably heard of straw breathing. Very simple breathing exercise where you breathe in. Usually you start with 4 and 8. You can do anything, but let's say you breathe in a 4 count, 4 seconds, or just 4 counts through the nose. In, 2, 3, 4, and then you breathe out and out, 8 count. Out through pursed lips like this, as if you're blowing through a straw. You can use a straw actually. If you want to cut a straw in half, use a straw. Or just pursed lips for an 8 count. Let's all do that together for a moment. Let's all just do that together. So I'll count. So we'll breathe into the nose with the mouth closed, and on the out breath, it's through pursed lips. And you can let it aspirate a little if you want. You don't have to, right? So we'll go ahead and start. So everybody give a little exhale, and let's start together with an inhale. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In, 2, 3, 4. Please give this a try. Just keep going now. I'm sure you have the idea by now. Close your eyes and tune into the body and breathing in that 4 count and breathing out the 8 count. Just continue that way and notice what's happening with your own physiology. You probably notice yourself slowing down, calming down, and it's really important to be able to feel into this, that you're training your body and mind so that you can be empowered to regulate your own autonomic nervous system. Right? So you're breathing in a 4 count through the nose and breathing out 8 count through pursed lips. Just keep breathing in that way. And I encourage you to close your eyes for a moment so you can really feel into the body. Notice a physiological shift. You'll notice physiological shift, emotional shift, cognitive shift as the body is calming down. And then I invite us to continue with the straw breathing for a moment. And then we're going to add something to it. After we breathe in 4, we're going to pause, hold the breath for 7. Now, if that's too uncomfortable, just hold it a little bit over time. You can develop the ability to hold it for 7. And then we breathe in, out 8. So it's in, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that's called 478 breathing. It was popularized by Andrew Weil, but it comes from the Ayurvedic tradition of pranayama. There's one more I'll mention, and you can find these on our website at heartmind.co for free. You go to the website, heartmind.co, co, and you see the tab that says resources, and there's videos of myself leading straw breathing, 478 breathing, and then also box breathing. And box breathing is where we have 4 parts to the breath. We have the in breath and a pause, and then the out breath and a pause. Right? So 4 parts: in, pause, out, pause. That's called box breathing, right? And usually you start with 4. So breathing in, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's box breathing. There's many, many breath exercises. These are 3 of the simplest and most easy to learn and very benevolent. They're not risky at all. And and beginning to work with those, you will strengthen your self-regulation network. So there's a network in the brain that has to do with regulating the autonomic nervous system, and that will become more robust. And you'll generally have a more balanced autonomic nervous system. Now, if we don't take responsibility and ownership for regulating our own autonomic nervous system, guess who is regulating it? Everybody but us. Everybody but us, the world around us, right? And that's often not a pretty sight. We all live in this interface or this space between our childhood conditioning, whatever that was, for better or worse. And, for most of us, it was a mixed bag. There's some good stuff in there. We got a certain amount of nurturing, hopefully, and, but challenges. And so most of it's kind of a mixed bag. But anyway, we got all this conditioning, most of it before we were in 7 years old. We had no choice about it. The family lineage just kind of got downloaded into us. And then they say, good luck, have a good life. Maybe you can work out the stuff we weren't quite able to work out yet. Right? And then you have the world around you and we live in there. And if we don't have a practice, we're in there kind of just getting bounced around in there. Now, if your childhood was absolutely benevolent and you were able to live in some benevolent bubble in the world, maybe that would be okay. But for most of us, our childhood was a mixed bag, and the world is certainly not. Even though I believe ultimately, I believe reality is benevolent. The relative world is often not so benevolent at all. So being in there without a practice, we're just kind of getting pushed around, right? So it's up to us to take ownership for regulating our own autonomic nervous system and really putting ourselves in the driver's seat of our own life, unless we're happy having everybody but us be in charge of our life, right? If we're happy with that, that's okay. It's up to each and every one of us. And the key thing is if we can regulate our own autonomic nervous system, we can then regulate our emotions. Then we'll talk more about that. That doesn't mean repress emotions, but it will mean we're not being hijacked by our emotions. We can regulate our emotions. If we can regulate our emotions, we can regulate our decisions and choices and actions. And that's we're in the driver's seat of our own life. We're developing capacity for self-leadership, right? So we're not back in the caboose getting dragged around through life, but we're actually in the driver's seat. My first teacher used the example of a horse and rider quite a bit. And his wife was a dressage champion and teacher and master, dressage master. Dressage is a particular equestrian discipline where you keep your butt in the saddle all the time and your hips have to learn to really rotate and move with the horse. If anybody ever saw videos of the Spanish riding school in Austria, where you have they're riding these beautiful Lipizzaner, white Lipizzaner stallions and doing all these incredible movements, that's dressage. And so at any rate, if you can imagine you're riding a horse and you have your foot too far in the stirrup, which you shouldn't do, but it gets caught in the stirrup, and then you fall off the horse, and you're hanging from the horse from the stirrup, and the horse takes off at a gallop, and your head's bouncing along the road, hitting every nook and cranny in the road, and boulder. That sometimes life feels a bit like that, right? But sooner or later, the horse will get tired and it'll stop to chew some grass, and hopefully you can climb back up in the saddle and get back in the saddle of your life, right? And learn to ride in unison with the horse, right? And Trungpa Rinpoche used another expression from dressage called holding your seat, holding your seat. When you're training in dressage, your trainer will be saying, hold your seat, hold your seat. And that's the idea of really staying, present and awake. And it's a great metaphor for meditation because in meditation, we have a cushion, we put our butt on the cushion and you hold your seat. No matter what occurs, if you're going to practice for 20 minutes, you commit to 20 minutes, and no matter what occurs, you stay there for 20 minutes, you hold your seat. And this training allows us to then hold our seat in the midst of our lives. I'm really grateful for all the training I received in holding my seat. These last 8 days I've been here in Peru have been incredibly emotionally intense and a lot of I won't get into it, but a very intense situation. And I'm very grateful for all that training that's allowed me to hold my seat and have a relative degree of equanimity going through this and skillfulness, hopefully. So at any rate, self-regulation network. So as we practice breath work like that, we're developing a more robust self-regulation network. And even just basic neurosomatic mindfulness is also doing that. Basic neurosomatic mindfulness is strengthening the self-regulation network. Okay, next, very importantly, the task positive network, the task positive network. So there are two networks in the brain which have a mutually antagonistic or inhibitory relationship. And you can look all this stuff up yourself. You can just go into ChatGPT, go into Google, and then if you take our neurosomatic mindfulness course, we list a lot of the research papers there. But this is all grounded in current research, and you can look this stuff up easily yourself. So you have the task positive network, and you have the default mode network. Many of you have probably heard of the default mode network. It's active when we don't direct our attention. If we just let our mind wander, that's the default mode network. And what does the default mode network do? It likes to time travel. It likes to go into the past and ruminate about the past, the imagined past. It likes to go into the imagined future and fantasize about the future, worry about the future. It has a running commentary about the imagined present, which isn't really the present. It's forming all of our opinions. It's all the self-sensing. It's thinking about me, what others think about me, and what I want, don't want. It's that very busy mind, right? The chatterbox between our ears. We're all very familiar with that. That's the default mode network. Now, I don't mean to demonize the default mode network, but in most Westerners, it's way overactive. We have these very busy minds, right? Keeps us very distracted. And of course, then, we've developed this whole world of social media and everything else that keeps us distracted. So at any rate, the default mode network has its purpose. And one of the reasons that it creates so much anxiety for us, it's really the source of all of our self-created stress and anxiety, is because of what's called the negativity bias in the human brain. Like what's job one for any species? Survival, right? So we have systems that are paying attention to the world called neuroception. We're reading the environment all the time through all the five senses as well directly from the nervous system. And what do you think we're scanning for all the time? We're scanning for threat, of course, because job one is survival, right? And so we've evolved such that our brain, when there's any sense of novelty or unfamiliarity, of much less threat or risk or real danger, the memory faculty of the brain goes really activated. It remembers everything with great detail, vividness, and clarity, and it goes right into long-term memory. Well, guess what happens when things are really chilled out? I'm on the back porch in a hammock. I'm feeling great. Life's cooperating with me for a few minutes, and everything's just great. Well, the mind is chilling out as well. The memory factor lowers down. We don't remember things with anywhere near the clarity, detail, or vividness. And it doesn't even go into long-term memory. It does not even go into long-term memory unless we hold it in short-term memory, the neuroscience says, for 12 to 25 seconds, right? So guess what our long-term memory is mostly full of? Experiences of risk and danger and threat. And that creates a negative implicit memory. And then we spin everything through that negative implicit memory. And so we tend to spin to the negative all the time. We assume the worst. So if you let your mind just wander, and this is all grounded in current neuroscience, if you just let your mind wander most of the time, where's it going to go most of the time? It's going to go to the negative. And so that's the source of all of our self-created stress, right? A wandering mind is an unhappy mind, according to current neuroscience. A mindful mind is a happier mind, right? So in terms of the so if we could remove the fear and anxiety from the default mode network, it actually is a tremendous source of creativity. Most artists that access, the artistic sensibilities, or scientists that solve incredible problems, or find mathematical solutions, or it's that's all through the default mode network. Um, Psychoanalysis, where you lay on the couch and you get into a relaxed enough setting so you can free associate, right? And tap the unconscious and dream states. That's all default network, but it requires relaxation and a lack of fear, right? You have to have the proper setting for that. But for most of us, the default network is a source of stress and anxiety, right? And the very busy mind. So when all of us first tried to meditate, and it was difficult to meditate because our mind was going all over the place, that's the default mode network, okay? Now, the task positive network is activated when we direct our attention, right? So I'd ask everybody to imagine something for just a moment. Close your eyes for a moment and just imagine that you're trying to thread a needle. I'm sure we've all done that one time or another. Just imagine you're trying to, you hold that thread, maybe you licked it a little bit to get a fine point on the thread. You got the eye of the needle there, and you're really focusing to try to get that thread to the needle. Okay, you're probably noticing that, at least for a moment, the mind really quiets down. You may not be able to sustain that, but at least for a moment, the mind got very quiet. So that's activating the task positive network. So anytime we direct our attention, we're activating the task positive network. And the wonderful thing is they have this mutually inhibitory relationship. So you bring on the task positive network, the default mode network goes offline, and the mind quiets down naturally. This is really the key to neurosomatic mindfulness, at least in the beginning. So we don't have to struggle with our thoughts, which is counterproductive. Some people think meditation is about getting rid of thoughts or having no thoughts. No, that's counterproductive. When we struggle with our thoughts, we just create more thoughts, right? We just want to create a container and let the mind quiet down by itself. Well, by activating the task positive network, we can accelerate that quieting down. And the best way to do that is ground our attention in the body by yoking our attention with the deeply felt experience of not the concept of body, body's just a word or a concept, but the actual sensory experience of body inside and out, the actual tactile sensations. We have to actually train ourselves to kind of penetrate beneath the level of the conceptual body, what my first teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, called the psychosomatic body, into what he called body, the actual direct experience of the sensory body. And when we do that and yoke our attention with that and train ourselves to do that over time, that keeps the task positive network activated and stabilized. And thus our attention stabilizes and the pulmonal network goes offline. The mind becomes very clear. We have very stable attention. That leads to access to deeper states of awareness. And then the deepest states of awareness and the deepest states of flow, which in the Eastern traditions are called samadhi, and to tremendous possibilities for healing trauma, nurturing and liberating and awakening. So that's the task positive network. And we develop that by directing our attention. And with neurosomatic mindfulness, by learning to really develop this deep anchor of this deeply felt sensory experience of the body inside and out. We're grounding in that and we're developing a very robust task positive network. The task positive network in the brain becomes more robust, thicker, and thus we find that we have a more stabilized attention. Most of the time we're walking around, our mind is not so busy anymore. It's actually when we need to use the mind, we can use it any way we want. But when we're not using it, directing it, it's mostly fairly quiet and spacious and clear. Imagine. So that comes from practice, right? So that's a task positive network, which regulates the default mode network. Okay. Now the fourth one is the emotion regulation network, the emotion regulation network. Okay. So the emo is just what it says. It regulates our emotions, not about repressing emotions. But if we get hijacked by negative emotions, we're pretty much out of control. It triggers the reptilian brain response, the fight or flight. And to the extent that the reptilian brain, which is the survival part of the brain, takes control, the smart part of our brain and the neocortex goes offline, and we don't make very good decisions. I'm sure many of us have been really triggered emotionally and then said or done something we later regretted, right? We've all had that experience, and maybe we had to clean it up, right? Can have a lot of negative consequences because that reptilian brain response is there to keep us alive, but we don't make very good decisions from there, you know. So we use breath work and other things when we know we're triggered, get untriggered. Anytime you're emotionally triggered, you have one on one and only job. That's to get untriggered so you can make better decisions, right? We've all heard the idea of you're really angry, count to 10. What happens by the time you count to 10? You begin to chill out a little bit, right? Why does that happen? Well, focusing on counting distracts us maybe a bit from whatever's triggering us, but also the reptilian brain can't count. The reptilian brain couldn't count if its life depended on it. So by remembering to count, we're gaining access to the neocortex, to the smart part of our brain, right? And then the brain comes back online and we can make better decisions, right? So emotion regulation, right? Now, when we get hijacked, this is Dan Goleman, who wrote all the books on emotional intelligence. He called this uh, the amygdala hijack, right? So the amygdala are these little alarm bells in the limbic brain, the midbrain, limbic brain, which is where we process emotions and memory and language and a lot of things. And there are these, and most of our brain, you have two of everything because we have right and left hemisphere, right? And so the midbrain has right and left hemispheres, and you have two amygdala, one right, one left. And the amygdala are like these little alarm bells. And when they get triggered, this whole neurochemical process happens and a whole shift in our autonomic nervous system, and we're going into fight or flight, right? And so when they get triggered, it's called the amygdala hijack. And what's happening is the feeling brain hijacks the thinking brain, the smart brain, and turns over control to the survival brain. And we're on autopilot, which is okay if it's a real crisis, right? But not so helpful most of the time, right? That's the amygdala hijack. Well, the more we train in neurosomatic mindfulness, the more we do intentional training around self-regulation with the breath, the more we develop a robust task positive network, the more we naturally also strengthen the emotion regulation network. Because the emotion regulation network and the task positive network and the attention network and the self-regulation network, they're all interconnected. They're not the same, but they're interconnected and they connect some similar parts of the brain in different ways. So strengthening the attention network, the self-regulation network, and the um, task positive network naturally also strengthens the emotional regulation network. Now, you all probably have heard in various meditation traditions that how do we work with emotions? We don't repress emotions. It's not about repressing ever. Very important. Emotions are very important, the richness of our life. But it's also not getting carried away by our emotions. So the instruction generally with meditation is don't repress emotions, but don't indulge them either. Don't let yourself get carried away. So just by having that intention during our practice, we're also strengthening if we're willing to feel emotions. If we're willing to feel sadness and fear and anxiety and gladness and happiness and joy and peace and bliss and jealousy and anger and envy and just really feel all these human emotions, not demonize them. They're all natural. There's not a single human emotion that's not normal and natural. How could there be? It's just part of being a human being. We're emotional beings. We're physical beings, we're cognitive beings, we're emotional beings, we're spiritual beings, right? So, and the essence in the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition, the essence of all these emotions is wisdom. Many of you may have heard of the five Buddha families, which is a very important structure within Vajrayana Buddhism, and it's kind of a depiction of the cosmic energy of reality and of how everything works. And there's the Vajra family, which is connected with mirror-like wisdom, but it's also connected with anger. Or there's the Padma family, which is connected with discriminating awareness wisdom, but it's also connected with lust and the ultimate carried away lust, right? There's nothing wrong with human desire and human passion, but it gets carried away, right? And all the different the karma family, rather, they all have their enlightened energy, but they have their neurotic manifestations. And we, right in the midst of an outburst of anger, we could become enlightened if we have the presence of mind to capture mirror-like wisdom in the midst of a state of anger. That requires a lot of practice and stabilized attention, but there's nothing wrong with any of our emotions. So we want to experience our emotions, but we don't want to be carried away by them, right? So since we have that intentionality in our practice, both our formal sitting practice and our day-to-day, moment-to-moment meditation and action practice, then that's strengthening our emotion regulation network, right? So now we have four: attention, attention network, self-regulation network, task positive network, and emotion regulation network. And they all help each other. So we're getting a not only it's not just 1 + 1 + 1 = 4, it's more like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 108 or something, right? There's this synergistic impact, right? And they all support each other. Okay, now there's one more network, and then we're going to shift back into some practice. So this next network is the empathy connection network, right? Empathy connection network. And this is connecting with others. This is how we connect with others, right? And, we're all deeply interconnected anyway, regardless. Even when we think we're not, we are. But, when it's conscious, then it supports us, it nurtures us. We're social beings, right? And we're connected into the fabric. Basically, as human beings, we're an energetic matrix, a matrix of energy that's actually, as we perceive the relative world, it feels solid and discrete, right? But we even know from, in the Eastern sciences, consciousness is primary, and the physical world is a manifestation from consciousness. In the Western world, we think the material is primary, and science still can't figure out how consciousness happens. They call it the hard problem of consciousness. With everything we know about all the neurobiological processes of the brain, science still doesn't know how the heck consciousness actually occurs. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. But with quantum theory, which is part of Western science, it gets pretty deep into the area where things get pretty wonky and fluid, and obviously it's pretty much, like consciousness, pure consciousness, right? If you read the writings of a lot of the early quantum theorists, if you read their personal writings, they all sound like mystics, right? So, at any rate, we are a matrix of energy situated in a greater matrix of energy, all interconnected, very fluid, right? And the more we awaken, the more we have access to perceive that fluidity, rather than perceiving things as just I'm here and that's over there. We start to actually perceive the fluidity, and things are more brilliant and awake and alive, right, through our practice, right? So, but our ability to connect with others in relative terms, to connect with each other here on Zoom, even, we're doing this here to one degree or another as we look at each other on Zoom. And again, I'm going to scroll through screens here so I can see more folks. Um, we are not just working with self-regulation, but we're working with co-regulation because our neuroceptive capacity is communicating with each other. And because most of us are probably in a fairly benevolent frame of mind and a fairly relaxed state here as we're doing this, we're neuroceptively, we're communicating safety to each other and openness, right? So we're co-regulating, right? And so that is a natural process, but can also be intentional. Now, this is a very important point here. The same neural networks and neural processes that are involved in self-regulation and deeper interoceptive awareness. Now, I haven't mentioned that term yet, but interoceptive awareness is our capacity to feel the body inside, right? To be aware of all the physical sensations. And we all, even if we never heard that term, we're well aware of interoceptive awareness because it's how we know when we're thirsty, it's how we know when we're hungry, it's how we know when we're tired, it's how we know we need to use the restroom. When we experience any pain or discomfort in the body, that's a headache, indigestion, that's interoceptive awareness. Now, the problem is that absent some discomfort, we generally ignore the internal landscape of the body. In Western culture, we've become very disembodied. We live up in our heads all the time. We live in the head and out there, right? And we've kind of abandoned the body. And in fact, I have a friend that says in Western culture, the body has been relegated to be nothing other than a brain taxi, just something to carry around this supercomputer up on our shoulders, right? And mostly we ignore the body unless there's discomfort. Then we go, oh, yeah, there's my body. I have a stomach ache, right? Or a headache, right? But so we can intentionally regain access to the internal landscape of the body, and this is activating our natural capacity for interoception, fancy word for internal perception. So we have interoception and exteroception. Exteroception is how we perceive the external world through the five senses, including touch on the surface of the skin. And then interoception is how we perceive the internal sensory landscape of the body. Now, actually, touch on the outside of the body goes through a different set of neural networks to the brain, which is highly myelinated, which makes it more efficient. And so we're very sensitive to touch, right? Goes to the brain very quickly. The internal sensations go through a different set of neural networks to the brain that is less myelinated, less efficient, and therefore internal sensations tend to be more subtle, except when there's some intense pain of some kind, right? But they tend to be more subtle. But we can develop a greater and greater capacity for interoceptive awareness, which means, again, we're changing the networks in the brain, we're shifting the neural architecture of the brain, and we're developing not just the ability to go into interoception now by, okay, I'm going to feel into my body, I'm going to feel, but actually it becomes more like our walking around baseline. We're generally more aware of the body, right? That means we're changing the brain. So the same neural networks that are involved in enhanced interoceptive awareness are also involved in our ability to connect with each other. So the more we develop the robust neural networks that support interoceptive awareness, we naturally have a greater ability to connect with others and to create intimacy and connection and safety with others. So developing our capacity for self-regulation quite naturally leads to our capacity for co-regulation. Now, of course, we can also practice co-regulation. We can practice our listening skills. We can just remember when we're talking with family and friends to make a gentle effort to be more present, to let the mind quiet down, to feel our own body, tap into self-regulation. I mean, interoceptive awareness for one, be more physically present, and then be really curious about the other person's, how they are, and we can actually be practicing as we're communicating with other people to practice presence and practice good listening, right? And that we're developing by doing those practices. In workshops, I lead these eye gazing exercises and lots of other presencing work that we do in dyads and small groups. All these are strengthening the empathy connection network. But doing the other four networks I talked about, even through personal meditation, doing it in this deeply embodied way, which I call neurosomatic mindfulness, that also will naturally strengthen our capacity for co-regulation. In other words, the empathy connection network. So these are the five networks. Again, the attention network, the self-regulation network, the task positive network, the emotion regulation network, and the empathy connection network. Now, we're just about finished with this. We're going to go back into practices, but imagine for a moment. Imagine for a moment yourself or a human being who has very stabilized attention, right? They're just clear, they're present, they're not distracted. The mind is basically clear most of the time, unless they decide to think about something, right? But if not, the mind is open, clear, available, and that's very stable. So imagine that. Now imagine they're also someone who is naturally well regulated. They're not getting bounced all over the place. Their sympathetic, I mean, their autonomic nervous system is an appropriate state of balance for whatever they're doing. And they're internally consciously, and they've almost, when you learn to really consciously self-regulate, over time, this becomes automatic. And you automatically self-regulate in appropriate ways to whatever's going on. So imagine a person who's in the optimal state of self-regulation all the time. So their mind is very clear and open, right? They have very stable attention. They're in the optimal state of self-regulation all the time, right? Now also imagine that they have continual activation of the task positive network because they're deeply embodied, right? And thus the mind is quiet and open. Also imagine that they're very alive to their emotional experience. They're very alive to their emotional experience, but they're not hijacked by it, right? So they're very sensitive, emotional beings. They have high degree of empathy and emotional intelligence and emotional wisdom, but they're not hijacked by it, right? And then imagine that they're naturally open and relational and connected with others. I imagine someone who's really at kind of very optimal levels of all those things. Well, what would we call such a person? Well, it's starting to get pretty close to what we call being enlightened, right? Or being awakened. Now, it very well may be, and I definitely have studied, I continually study all the Enlightenment traditions across our human culture, past, present, and so forth. Um, it may be that we can do all this development and get very close to some kind of ultimate liberation. It may still require some kind of nonlinear event, some nonlinear event that triggers that tips a tipping point. We reach a tipping point and some nonlinear event happens to where our consciousness reconnects with pure consciousness and we're stabilized in a complete awakened state, right? So, but we can get very close to that. And most people would probably think of us as a very awakened, very wise, very liberated, very adult, very, conscious human being, right? We can do all that, and then, full enlightenment is probably going to happen according to some kind of karma, nonlinear tipping points, and so forth. But nonetheless, we can really optimize who we are and how we're showing up and experiencing life and bringing value to life as human beings. Is this making sense? Kind of raise your hands if this is all making sense, if this is coming together. Yeah. Okay. Great. Wonderful. Wonderful. So, neurosomatic mindfulness is designed to optimize all these networks and to have all these five of these networks become stronger and stronger and stronger, more robust over time. And it does it in part by this ongoing activation of the task positive network through deeply embodied practice, right? And it does it because we're practicing with awareness in a deeply embodied way. We're developing this internal neural biofeedback loop. Now, people have probably heard of biofeedback where you're hooked up to a heart monitor and you get a digital or analog visualization. And I love the golden doodle there with Apostolina. I have a golden doodle at home, and I really miss him. Kiku is his name. And so we have this internal neurobiofeedback. So with biofeedback, you're watching your heartbeat on an analog or digital representation. And anybody can very learn quickly to regulate your own heart up and down, your heartbeat up and down with your mind. It's called biofeedback. Then you have neurofeedback, where you're connected to a machine connected to your brain waves, and you can see a representation, digital analog of your brainwave state, delta and beta, alpha, delta, gamma, and so forth. And you can learn to regulate your own brainwave states through this visual representation because you're connected to this machine. Well, we can develop the same neural biofeedback loop internally without any machines. Because as we're practicing in this deeply embodied, awake way, we're getting a lot of data internally. And with any shift in attention or posture or anything we do, that's changing. So our body is learning. This is an internal learning process. And the more we drop into deep states of flow through our practice, the brain remembers how to get there. It's learning how to get there. It becomes easier and easier. And so that the brain has this readily ongoing access to stabilized attention, profound, vast, deep awareness, and deep states of flow or samadhi, right? The brain is learning how to get there, right? And so all this is, we're reshaping our own neural architecture such that we have greater access. And any time that we spend in flow or samadhi, the nervous system is kind of untangling itself. It's healing all the kinks. It's healing the trauma, right? And we're developing the foundation, the neural foundations for living. As long as we're in a body, right? I believe we're much more than the body, but as long as our being is in a body, having this human experience, we're all spiritual beings having a human experience, not the opposite. We're spiritual beings having a human being experience. So as long as we're in a body, we do need to work with this body, and we can train the body mind to regulate it so it's a body mind that really supports healing and flow and awareness and eventually awakening. Okay, so that's the model. That's the model. So I'm going to open, Eric, if you can open the chat for a moment, and let's see, where are we? I'm going to close the participant window and open up the chat and allow people to ask, put questions in there. Uh, oh, somebody's going to join Michael Stone for breakfast. That's wonderful. My colleague Michael Stone wonderfully offers free breathwork sessions online. I highly recommend that. Um, Yeah, so some very nice comments from folks and condolences, and I really very deeply appreciate that. Thank you so much. And we have people from all over the world. There's somebody here from Bolivia next door to Peru, right? So we have people from Brazil. We have people literally here from all over the world, all over North America and Europe and South America, and I'm sure we have some folks from India and Africa. We usually do, and from Asia. So this is absolutely wonderful. So if anybody has any particular question, what if you, it's moving, what if you empathic connection um, system is so intense that it's dysregulating? Yeah. What about someone with sociopathic behavior? Um, how can you utilize? Okay, so a couple of these things. So we generally, and again, I want to shift back into practice in just a moment, but um, when we have questions about things, we tend to go to the extreme. So what about somebody who's sociopathic? Well, first of all, we may think somebody's sociopathic. There's very few people who are literally sociopathic, fortunately. And if they're literally sociopathic, it's brain damage. And we really don't know whether people who are really clinically sociopathic can be healed in this body in this lifetime. I don't rule that out myself. I think, because of neuroplasticity, I think a lot of things are possible. And I think with the right situation, it would be very difficult for someone who's clinically sociopathic to get them to practice to begin with. But still, I wouldn't rule it out. But usually that's a question of brain damage. And it's a very small percentage of people who are literally sociopathic. I mean, I haven't looked at that lately, but I mean, it's 1/10 of 100%. It's a very small group of people really that are literally sociopathic. Now, all of us are more or less conscious, or more or less have more or less levels of ignorance or consciousness in life. We know that. Um, Now, what if we are so empathic and so sensitive that that is dysregulating? That's a great question. That's a great question. So we're all empathic beings. We couldn't function if we weren't empathic. And what does empathy mean? It means our ability to sense the world around us and to sense what other people are feeling, as well as to sense our own feelings, right? So that's empathy. And in general, in our culture, in general, I hate to make these generalizations, but in general, women are enculturated to be more empathic, men less so. Whether there's any genetics involved in that, I have no idea. But we're all empathic to a greater or lesser degree. Now, that just means the channels are open. Now, if the channels are wide open and we're highly empathic, that can lead to empathic distress, especially if we're around a lot of suffering and if we're involved, if we're nurses or doctors or psychologists or therapists or whatever. But even just generally, we can be so tuned into the world around us and the level of suffering, it can be very destabilizing. It leads to empathic distress. And if we have no way to work with that, then the body will start shutting down. It'll lead to some form of um, empathic overload and empathic fatigue. And that's not a character defect. It's just our system is shutting down to protect ourselves, some level of burnout, some kind of empathic fatigue. Some people call it compassion fatigue, but that's not really what it is. Compassion is in of itself transformative. Compassion means we're able to respond to empathic distress. And we have the aspiration to reduce suffering or alleviate suffering. And sometimes there's nothing we can do but be with people when they're suffering. But if we could do something, we would, right? And that in of itself, we know that acting altruistically or acting compassionately, we get all kinds of neurobiological rewards for that. So it's in of itself healing and transformative, right? So, but yes, being what some people call an empath, and I think that term is used a little loosely these days, but if we're highly empathic and we're taking in a lot, what do we need? We need more greater self-regulation, right? The more self-regulated, everything we talked about, attention network, self-regulation network, task positive network, emotion regulation, the more robust all these are, the more we can be awake to the world and not have it destabilize us, right? Now, there's so much suffering going on in the world. And because of modern communications, if we get into watching the news all the time, it can be incredibly anxiety producing. We can get into doom scrolling on our phones and so forth. That can be very addictive because of the negativity bias and negativity in our culture. We get addicted to the negativity and so forth, and it keeps us in a state of stress. So we need to, I begin the first thing is you got to disengage and take care of yourself. It all begins with self-care and self-regulation. And I really think we should titrate our exposure to the news and everything. Not, I don't think we should ignore what's going on or live in a bubble, but we need to titrate it, right? And if we realize we've gotten kind of addicted, we really need to work with that and sort of step back from that and self-care. However, if we are able to develop really robust these five networks, theoretically, we could be empathically open to anything and everything, which is, when you think of most the famous avatars and enlightened beings and that are present even today on our planet, one of their qualities is they're just wide open to the world. And they're able to do that and it doesn't harm them. Why? Because they have these incredibly powerful, optimized five neural networks, appealing and awakening. And thus they have a greater and greater capacity. So all of us need to be very self-honest about what our capacity is at any given moment and not overload ourselves because if we overload ourselves, we're doing damage to ourselves. So we need to balance, our altruistic intention to be present to others and to the world with our need for self-care and the need to develop this capacity, right? Right. But ultimately, we are developing this capacity not just to be, oh, I'm such an enlightened being. No, we're developing this capacity to serve. We're developing these greater capacities to serve the world and to be compassionate because the world needs enlightened people. The world needs awake people. The world needs compassionate people, right? So we're developing this for a reason, but we have to, take care of ourselves enough to develop it. If we just throw ourselves out there, we're just going to get dysregulated and self-harm, right? So I think that was a really important question somebody brought up. Will a recording be available? Uh, I think so. I have to check with Eric. Maybe Eric can put something in Slack about how we're working with that. We'll talk later about other opportunities, what's going to be available. We are getting towards the end of our time here, so I want to close with a meditation. We're going to close with a meditation of neurosomatic mindfulness in just a moment, but I want to let you know about some other opportunities to go further. So I have I believe it's an 8 module course on neurosomatic mindfulness. It's not particularly expensive and you get lifetime access to it. It's yours forever if you buy it. And we go deeply into all this foundation training in neurosomatic mindfulness. And so that's one thing. We also have our Heart Mind community where you get access to all of our summits and all of our courses as a subscription basis for a year. And again, it's not very expensive at all and you become a Heartman. You pay on an annual basis, and depending on when you join, it's like I don't know. I think ultimately it's like 297 a year, but sometimes most of the time you can get the first year of 197. Less than it's like less than 50 cents a day, and you get access to over 1,000 hours of the most brilliant teachers the world over of all this kind of material, healing trauma, neuroscience, and meditation, and everything. And but then I do 2 live sessions for the community every month. So I do a live session on neurosomatic mindfulness, and I do a live session on kind of a group coaching around my radical responsibility model, which is just taking a lot of ownership for our lives. Right. So those are available with membership. Then if with membership, you get access to the neurosomatic mindfulness course and all the other courses like the regenerative self-parenting, which is another advanced neurosomatic mindfulness course and so forth. So that's all available. We also do intensives. We have this Waking Up Now intensive, which we run cohorts of 2 or 3 times a year. And there will be another one coming up in the not too distant future. And it's a 2 month, 60-day intensive meant to really, I mean, you do this program, it is going to radically shift your practice. And we have incredible testimony. Even people who've been practicing 30 years, advanced practitioners, they find it's radically shifting and deepening their practice. Newcomers do it and they find it just takes them right into practice step right off the bat. Intermediate practice. And we hear from every level of practice that this 60-day intensive is radically changing their practice in very, very beneficial ways. And we have 2 versions of that. One includes all the coursework, which happens over the online coursework, which is part of the 60-day intensive. and it includes the monthly sessions with me that are part of the community. That's one thing. It's very intensive. It'll do all the results. And then there's another version where I do more live sessions when I can only work with a limited number of people that directly. So there's two versions of it. There's a one basic version and kind of premium version. The premium version, there's I think four additional live sessions with me. So you'll receive information about that. And we also have a 21-day NSM uh, challenge where you get a new meditation every day. So these are some of the different offerings we have, and you'll get this information, right? So let's close today though with meditation. So I invite everyone again to take a posture that feels open. And but again, thank you all so much for being here today. And I hope you feel this has been valuable, what I've been sharing about these neural networks. And again, just to mention again, okay, practice stacking. Let me mention this really quickly. So some breath work, straw breathing, 4-7-8 breathing, box breathing, right? Learn those. They're right on our website for free. Basic meditation, do the basic neurosomatic mindfulness probably to begin with. Or you can start with breath work, you can go back and forth, right? Not to mix it up, but say, I'm going to do this for 5 minutes and I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. Be intentional about it and write down what you do because over time you can keep notes and change it, right? And you're doing your own, you're being your own scientist, right, of the art here, right? And then you might do something like tapping, like my routine includes tapping. If you're familiar with tapping or EFT practice, right? Tapping like this, people familiar with it, tapping pretty simple to learn. It's great. Yeah. Tapping, EFT tapping, it's wonderful practice. And while I'm doing tapping, I'm doing my gratitude practice. Gratitude practice, really important. So as I'm doing tapping, I'm doing my gratitude practice. Then I use it as a priming practice. So I want to cultivate certain mind states. So I do tapping while I'm going love, healing, gratitude, forgiveness, peace, and bliss. 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 At the end of my hour practice stack each morning, I'm in a state of profound gratitude, profound forgiveness, practically in a state of ecstasy that I'm building it up in a state of flow. And because I'm in that state, my brain is changing. And I go about my day and I'm more likely to be in my day, more in a state of gratitude, more in a state of openness and appreciation, more in a state of flow and being, right? So I use breath work. I do all kinds of breath work. If you're going to get into more intense breath work, you need good guidance because breath work can be destabilizing. Somebody mentioned Michael Stone, Neurodynamic Institute. He's a close colleague of ours. His breath work is very safe, but it's intense. You need to do it with good guidance, and he gives good guidance, and he gives all the safety protocols. Holotropic breath work, very intense. Again, it has to be done with careful guidance. There's a lot of, the Wim Hof work, very intense. I do a lot of that, but, you need good guidance. But the simple ones like 4-7-8 breathing, straw breathing, box breathing, those are very benevolent, simple. Anybody can learn those. They're not dangerous, right? So some breath work, the neurosomatic mindfulness, perhaps tapping, a gratitude practice. Um, any kind of visualization practice, any kind of affirmations, positive affirmations, right? Not the kind of nonsense ones like, if you're wanting to grow your wealth, like I really am a millionaire. There really is a Rolls Royce in my driveway. That's nonsense, doesn't work. But I'm committed to doing everything I need to do to become healthy and to increase my longevity. I'm committed to doing everything I need to do to optimize my health and well-being. I'm committed to doing everything I need to do to further develop my career and my financial well-being. These kind of affirmations can be very powerful. You're programming your consciousness, right? So visualization, affirmation, tapping, breath work, meditation, experiment, create your own stack and keep a journal, keep notes as you develop your own stack. This is the idea of stacking practices. And you can experiment which one you put first, how long you do of each one. I really encourage you to get into this. To me, this is really the kind of ultimate technology. Now, this is not new. When I do my Vajrayana practice with my wife, Sophie, right? They've been doing practice stacking forever. Our practice includes basic mindfulness awareness meditation. Any given session, a sadhana session, we're there for an hour, hour and a half. It includes posture. It includes basic mindfulness awareness meditation. It includes breath work. It includes mantra. It includes visualization. It includes liturgical practice. It includes, and they're all stacked up in a certain very intentional way, right? So this is not a new idea. This is I'm kind of integrating with a lot of modern technologies. But again, the yogis have been figuring this stuff out east and west for thousands of years, right? So anyway, I want to mention that. Okay, so let's finish off with a little practice. Okay, so finding that posture that for you feels upright, uplifted, awake, at the same time relaxed and stable. I encourage you to let a slight smile come to your lips and your face. Smiling is incredibly healthy, as most of us know, does all kinds of incredible neurobiological things when we relax and smile. Again, just dropping into the body, feeling into the body, letting our attention drop from the head down into the body, and just relaxing into being, just pure being. Nothing to do, nothing to accomplish. Nobody's analyzing us. Nobody's measuring us. We don't need to measure ourselves. We're not trying to win anything. There's nothing to win or lose. We're just relaxing in a pure being, just allowing ourselves a moment of pure presence, relaxed beingness, and cultivating these attitudinal qualities of self-acceptance, non-judgment, openness, and most importantly, deep, deep curiosity, activating a natural, deep longing to know ourselves as deeply as we can, experientially to know our being as deeply as we can through presence and wakefulness. And then feeling into the body as deeply as we can from head to toe. And it's a gentle, we're not forcing it, it's very gentle. In terms of the internal landscape of interoception, it's almost like you consciously open the doors, and then that internal landscape just starts to emerge and become more vivid and more present in our field of awareness. Hmm. Feeling deep into the body with curiosity and openness, and simply allowing ourselves to be just as we are in this moment, and to feel whatever we're feeling in the moment, whatever is happening moment to moment, physically, emotionally, cognitively, simply allowing it to be just as it is. Whatever arises, so and that too. How interesting. Being and feeling, feeling and being and feeling, feeling and being and feeling and being. Mhm. Letting that nice smile come to your lips, feeling presence throughout the body, kind of like a tingling quality from head to toe. Letting the breath just find its own natural rhythm with the air flowing in and out of our body and lungs, just like waves lapping at the seashore, in and out. Pure presence, pure being, feeling and being and feeling and being and feeling. While continuing to rest in this very relaxed state of feeling and being, I encourage you to open your eyes and kind of join with each other on Zoom and maybe scroll through the camera and just see if you can connect with different people. Everybody, if you could turn your cameras on, I'm scrolling through all the screens and just offer a smile and offer your presence to each other. All of us, wonderful human beings all over the world, connecting here with our intentions to continue our own path of spiritual and personal evolution and share that with others and bring more consciousness to the world, to our own lives and to others. And consciously doing this practice for the benefit of all beings. We know there's so much suffering in our world, but there's also growing consciousness in our world. I really believe the world, even though if you look at the news, you think the world's going to hell in a handbasket. But I think at the same time, the world is becoming more and more consciousness. And, who knows which way is going to win out. There's no guarantees what's going to happen. But I do think there's a lot of awakening going on. And I have a lot of confidence and optimism because of that, despite all the struggles we see in the world. Yeah, so just take a moment to connect with somebody, give somebody a smile. And it's really wonderful for me. I'm seeing a lot of old friends here, a lot of folks I've been practicing with for a long, long time, and then seeing a lot of new friends. And just getting this sense of this meta sangha, human beings from all over the world connecting in community, practicing together. I encourage all of us to bring our hands to the heart for a moment and intentionally breathe through the heart, breathing in through the heart and out through the heart. And just breathing in love and gratitude and peace and bliss, and then breathing in that out and sharing it with each other. Love, healing, gratitude, forgiveness, peace, and bliss. Love, healing, gratitude, forgiveness, peace, and bliss. Being willing to receive that for ourselves without any sense of guilt or anything. We're all divine beings, and we completely have every right to be experiencing love, healing, forgiveness, peace, and bliss. And then sharing that, sending it out to each other here on Zoom and to all beings throughout the world, throughout all the dimensions. Breathing in through the heart and out through the heart, which actually creates, if you want to get back into neuroscience, is creating brain-heart coherence. If you want to get the three brains, the brain in the skull encapsulated brain, the brain in the heart, and the brain in the gut, you could put one hand on the stomach, the gut, one hand on the heart, put the tongue on the roof of your mouth, and as you breathe in, feel the energy moving from your tailbone all the way up the spine, through the central channel, all the way up to the very crown of the head. And on the out breath, it comes down through a forward channel, connects through the roof of the mouth, through the tongue, and comes down the forward part of the body, all the way back down to the tailbone. This is called the macrocosmic breath from Taoism. And we could do that with each other while again spreading love, healing, gratitude, forgiveness, peace, and bliss. Love, healing, gratitude, forgiveness, peace, and bliss. Bring ourselves and each other into complete coherence and flow and sharing this with all beings everywhere. So I really encourage all of us to continue practicing with these different practices and coming together. We'll do this every quarter. And hopefully, we're developing a worldwide sangha here of consciousness and good-heartedness and empathic connection. And it's just really a joy to be with all of you. And we've gone over time a little bit. I apologize for that. And I actually need to connect with a friend and go out and take care of some things out in the valley, the Sacred Valley, and so it's a couple hours bus ride I need to go take now. So at any rate, so appreciate all of you being here today, and thank you for all of the condolences you offered, and really wish you all great practice. And Heart Mind Institute, we're here. We're here to support your practice. We're here to support awakening. Uh, and when you invest with us and purchase any of our products, you're investing in our ability because our summits go out. About 96% of the people that do our summits do them for free, and we've reached over 2 million people worldwide with all these amazing teachings from the greatest neuroscientists and meditation teachers and positive psychologists. So, we're here to make a difference in the world, and by joining with us, you're investing in yourself and you're investing in us. So, encourage you to do that in any way. And if whatever your particular financial and resource situation is, if it really works for you just to join our free offerings and be there for that, we love that and love you being here and love you and really encourage you to keep coming. And if you do have any resources you want to invest in further courses and programs with us, that helps us reach everyone else who's around there in the world. So it's just kind of a flow. We're in here together, and love for you to be part of the Heart Mind community and consider becoming members of our community. It's a pretty inexpensive annual subscription. It gives you access to over 1,000 hours of transformational teachings and 2 live sessions a month. But anyway, it's just offering. So whatever works for you, whatever works for all of you. We love you being here. And Love being with all of you, and so grateful that all of you decided to come together today. It was registering 1,000 on Zoom for a long time, so I'll find out later and we'll publish this. How many people were in the live stream? And it's kind of interesting to know that there were that many of us worldwide all practicing together today. That's kind of amazing. And also, I'm going to read through all your questions that were in the chat. We'll print that out, and I'll have that, and I'll do some kind of answers, and we'll publish that out to you as well. So if there may be, we'll group some questions together, and we'll put some. I'll try to answer as many of those as I can, and we'll put that out. That we'll get some emails, some follow-up emails. We'll put that out there for you, and like that. And Eric probably answered that about the recordings. I do imagine that we'll be making a recording available and so forth. So I'm almost certain we do. And yeah, everybody who signed up, even if they didn't come live today, they can watch the recording. So I'm sure we'll make them available. So thank you all so much. Wishing you all the very best, and wishing you good practice, and um, may there be profound healing and awakening for all of you and for all beings and for your families and your friends and your communities. And really, in this troubled world of ours, where there's so much suffering, so much conflict, but at the same time, there's so many human beings of goodwill, and there's so much awakening and consciousness happening and developing that, it's a very interesting time to be alive. We have access to all the world's greatest yogic and spiritual and meditative traditions, and we have access to all the current neuroscience. So, a very interesting time to be alive. And I appreciate all of you so much. So, wishing you the best. We're going to sign off now, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And again, thank you so much for joining us.